He told her he wouldn't be in town for Christmas. But the champagne was already cold, the candles were already lit, and the woman wearing his shirt wasn't his sister. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories. If you've ever trusted someone, only to walk into a room and see the truth for yourself, this story is for you. Watch closely, feel deeply, and if her silence makes your chest ache, remember, not every betrayal needs words. Comment Christmas truth if you believe some heartbreaks speak louder than shouting. Celine Rourke didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam doors, chase answers, or force confessions. She designed weddings for a living. Her world was made of elegance, measured steps, and subtle gestures, not chaos. Baltimore knew her name in quiet ways. You'd see it on the corner of bridal magazines, tagged in photos of clean-cut ceremonies and soft palettes. Celine believed in symmetry, not just in her work, in her life. When something tilted, her instinct wasn't to fight, it was to step back and observe. That's why when her fiancé Callan Darrow called 2 days before Christmas and said he'd be in Virginia for a last-minute client emergency, she didn't argue. She simply paused, let the weight hit her chest, then answered, "Okay." No bitterness, no plea, just that single syllable, tight and composed. But her hands didn't forget. That night, she moved slower in her apartment, unpacking groceries, folding scarves, reaching for the hot water tap, then pulling back like she'd forgotten what she was doing. For the last 3 years, Christmas Eve was sacred to her. It was the one tradition she kept no matter how busy the season got, no matter how many dresses she had to pin or centerpieces she had to approve. On December 24th, she and Callan would turn their phones off, light the fireplace, and share a single bottle of Bordeaux in silence. He once told her, "You're the only person I can be still with." Now he couldn't even be present. It wasn't the first time she felt the shift. Over the past few months, the signs had whispered in corners. Dinners that used to last hours ended before dessert. He kissed her cheek like checking a box. And the messages, they came in shorter sentences, with no warmth between the punctuation. She didn't need drama to know something was wrong. She had instinct. And instinct never sleeps when something you love starts dying. Still, she kept it to herself. There were brides to meet, clients to calm, a winter wedding in Towson that nearly got snowed out. Life didn't stop because your heart held its breath. The message came the next evening. Her phone buzzed while she was brushing her teeth. "Camber. Hey, sorry to intrude. Not sure if this is anything, but thought you'd want to see." Attached, screenshot of a suite confirmation at Grand Caraway Hotel. Special romantic request for Mr. Darrow, December 24th. Firewood plus imported rose petals. Celine froze. The Caraway was downtown, only 20 minutes away. And suite 407? That was his suite. The one he booked for their 1-year anniversary. The one with the balcony view of the water and the velvet-backed armchairs she helped choose. Her thumb hovered over her screen. She didn't reply to Camber. She didn't call Callan. She opened her laptop and booked a room. The Grand Caraway was a historical marvel, 5 floors of dark brick and romantic architecture tucked into the center of Baltimore like a secret. On December 24th, it was especially busy. Families arrived in coats too thick for the lobby's golden glow. Kids ran toward the elevators. Bellhops smiled with practiced warmth. Celine walked in unnoticed. She wore a thick oatmeal sweater, simple jeans, and no makeup. In her hand, a small leather bag. No confrontation packed. No confrontation planned. She didn't want to fight. She just wanted to see. Her room was on the 3rd floor, not high enough to see the skyline, but close enough to feel the weight of the building settle on her chest. The air felt too clean, too curated. She sat on the edge of the bed, turned off her phone, and waited. The clock ticked, slow. At 5:45 p.m., she stood, buttoned her coat, slipped the backup keycard into her palm. Camber hadn't asked questions when she handed it over, only said, "If I'm wrong, ignore it," and walked away. But Camber wasn't wrong. Celine's hands weren't shaking from assumption. They were shaking from confirmation. Suite 407. She remembered every detail. The hallway's cinnamon scent, the way the wall sconces flickered slightly from old wiring. Her boots were soft against the carpet. Her breath, quiet. She didn't knock, didn't hesitate. She swiped the card. The green light blinked. The lock clicked, and the door opened. Inside, dim light, firewood, candles, champagne on ice, and her fiancé's voice, soft, laughing. He wasn't alone. On the couch, wearing one of his button-down shirts with nothing beneath it, a woman, blonde, mid to late 20s, bare feet tucked under her as she curled toward him. She laughed again, hand brushing his knee. Celine didn't move. Callan turned. His voice cracked. "Celine, what are you?" She didn't flinch. "Celebrating," she said flatly. "Isn't that what this is?" The blonde woman straightened up, brows furrowed. "Wait, is she your—" Callan didn't answer. Celine looked at him. No tears, no raised tone, just 3 words. "Merry Christmas." She turned, closed the door behind her. Back in her room, Celine didn't cry. She sat on the edge of the bed again. Same position, same bag beside her. Her eyes stared ahead, not at anything. Her silence wasn't emptiness. It was decision. She laid down fully dressed. Didn't close her eyes for hours. Some heartbreaks don't need sound. They speak in undone rituals. And that night, Christmas stopped meaning what it used to. The room didn't echo. It stayed quiet, as if respecting her heartbreak. Celine sat on the edge of the bed, her coat still on, fingers loosely curled over her knees. She didn't blink for a long time. Not out of shock, not anymore. It was something closer to stillness, the kind that sets in when the soul is no longer trying to resist what it already knew. The candles, the champagne, the woman in his shirt. None of it had screamed. But silence had always been the loudest language Celine understood. She didn't fall apart. At least, not in the way stories often tell you women do after betrayal. No screaming in the hallway. No shaking hands. No demands for explanation. The confrontation had happened in her presence, not her voice. And somehow, that felt cleaner. She stood, slowly, removed her coat, folded it gently and laid it across the hotel chair, then went into the bathroom and splashed water on her face. No smudged mascara, no tear trails, just a pale woman staring back in the mirror, heart cracked open, but pride intact. The next morning, Christmas was in full swing across the city. Families filled the hotel breakfast lounge. The scent of syrup, coffee, and peppermint filled the air. Children ran between chairs. Someone spilled cocoa near the fireplace and laughed. Staff moved around in pressed black uniforms, trying not to get caught in the emotion of the holiday. Celine checked out by 9:45 a.m. She carried the same leather bag from the night before, everything packed neatly. Her hair was pinned, her coat buttoned. No one could tell from her appearance that her engagement had ended the night before. She didn't call a cab right away. She stood outside beneath the frosted archway, watching a young couple try to balance a wrapped gift box and 2 toddlers. The woman was giggling. The man kissed her temple and whispered something that made her blush. Celine blinked slowly and turned away. The wind stung as she walked toward the historic district. The city was still half asleep, streets cleared for snowplows. But the cold helped. It dulled the ache, gave her something to focus on that wasn't the replay in her head. Suite 407. The way Callan's voice broke in surprise. The way the woman didn't even seem embarrassed. It hadn't just been the betrayal. It was the ease of it, the comfort of it, as if Celine's love had become an accessory he no longer needed. She walked to the community church, the same one her parents had renewed their vows in years ago. It stood quiet, red brick softened by years of weather and whispered prayers. The front doors were cracked open. She slipped inside. The interior hadn't changed. Still warm, still welcoming. The Christmas tree near the altar blinked softly, untouched. Only a few people sat scattered across the pews. some with their heads bowed, some just staring ahead. One elderly woman knitted quietly in the corner. Celine sat in the back row. She didn't pray. She just breathed. At the refreshments table, she poured herself a cup of tea. Her hands trembled for a moment as she reached for the sugar, not violently. Just enough to remind her that her body hadn't caught up to her silence. "Try the chamomile," a voice said beside her. "It doesn't shake back." Celine turned. A woman stood there, mid-50s maybe, with clear eyes and a calm energy. That made her presence feel like a blanket rather than a question. Celine gave her a soft smile but said nothing. The woman handed her a napkin, not for wiping, for reading, written on it in blue ink, "Don't chase what's already running away." Celine looked up, confused. But the woman had already turned, walking back toward the pews. She didn't approach again, didn't explain the note, didn't ask for Celine's story. She just gave her a truth, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't demand a reply. Celine left the church with a napkin folded in her coat pocket. She walked for a long time that day, past the bakery where Callan once bought her lemon scones after their first Christmas together, past the old bookstore where they'd once argued about whether love could survive betrayal in novels, past the bridal shop window where she'd stood 6 months ago, imagining what kind of gown she might wear. And as she passed each memory, she didn't flinch. They were pages now, not wounds. She wasn't bleeding. She was turning. That night, she returned to her apartment and cleaned. Not frantically, not symbolically, just cleaned, stripped the sheets, washed her mugs, cleared the fridge of the half-eaten things Callan had once picked up. Not to erase him, but to create space. She opened the windows and let the December air in. Then curled up on her couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, napkin still in hand. She read it again before falling asleep, not with tears, but with calm. The next 3 weeks passed like wind. She didn't tell her friends. Not yet. She returned to work, focused harder. Clients noticed her precision had sharpened. Brides clung to her calm like an anchor. One even asked her, "Have you ever been married?" Celine smiled. Not yet, but her tone didn't carry pain anymore. Just peace. She didn't block Callan. She didn't post anything. She didn't send a single message. And he didn't either. Not a call. Not a text. Not even an excuse. And somehow, that made her feel stronger. Because it meant she was right. He'd never planned to confess. She'd just arrived early. 3 months had passed. Baltimore was beginning to thaw, shedding its December frost for the hesitant bloom of early spring. Flower carts returned to the sidewalks. Brides began requesting blush tones and open-air venues again. And Celine Rourke, for the first time in a while, felt herself start to breathe, like someone who no longer carried someone else's lie in her chest. Her work helped. It always did. She wasn't just a wedding stylist. She was known in the local event circles as the one who could fix chaos without raising her voice. Celine made timelines look like poetry. She turned last-minute changes into deliberate design. She made other people's dreams the focus, because she'd already buried her own. Until February, until he walked across the atrium at the Downtown Design Expo. The Baltimore Creative Arts Pavilion was glass from floor to ceiling. A modern cathedral for artists, architects, designers, and idea makers. Every February, they hosted a regional showcase of wedding vendors, designers, and stylists from around the East Coast. Celine rarely attended the social mixers at the event. She preferred the daytime hours, less noise, more space to breathe. She had just finished setting up her display booth when she saw him. Black suit, no tie, holding a cup of black coffee in one hand, the other casually tucked in his pocket. He wasn't loud. He didn't move like someone desperate to impress. He moved like someone who didn't need to. He stopped in front of her table and took his time inspecting the layout. Minimalist, no clutter. One large photo print of a waterfront wedding she styled. A muted linen board with dried florals pinned in a cross-diagonal sweep. A small stack of business cards that matched the tone perfectly. He studied it for longer than most people ever did. Then said, "Bold to keep everything so simple." She looked up from adjusting a card holder. "Bold to wear a suit and not introduce yourself." He smiled. He extended his hand. "Lennox Vale." "Celine Rourke." He didn't say anything for a second, just looked around her table again. "Most people try to sell the chaos. You're selling the calm. I don't sell. I solve. Even better." That was the beginning. He didn't flirt. He didn't compliment her looks. He didn't pretend to know the industry better than he did. He simply asked, "Do you have time for a walkthrough?" Celine blinked. "Of the venue? No. Of the whole expo. I've been here 20 minutes and already want to skip half the booths, but I think you have good taste. I need someone to keep me from wasting time." She hesitated. He added, "No sales pitch, I promise." She looked at the vendors around. Most of them were still setting up or chatting with the early crowd. She nodded. 10 minutes. I'm back at noon for a planner consult." They walked slowly, stopping at a few booths. He didn't say much, asked smart questions, made a quiet comment about floral foam being a crime against nature, which made her laugh for the first time in weeks. He didn't ask if she was single. He didn't ask if she was free later. He just walked with her, thanked her at the end, and left with one card in his pocket, hers. She didn't expect him to call, but he did. Exactly 4 weeks later, their first meeting outside the expo wasn't a dinner. It wasn't a drink. It wasn't anything that could be mistaken for a date. He asked her to meet him at a local bakery that served French-style croissants. 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. When she arrived, he was already seated by the window with a notebook open, glasses resting low on his nose. He closed it when he saw her. "Glad you came. You were specific. I was curious." "Good." She sat. He pushed a warm almond croissant toward her. "Best in the city. Non-negotiable." They spoke for 2 hours. Not about dating, not about pain. They talked about buildings, about which seasons suited which venues, about the way certain tablecloths changed the mood of a room, about silence, and why some people avoided it because they didn't want to hear their own thoughts. "I don't mind silence," she said. "I know," he replied. He told her he worked in private space planning and architectural recovery. He renovated damaged spaces, emotional, literal, financial. "My company takes buildings no one wants to save and makes them impossible to ignore." She raised an eyebrow. "That sounds expensive." "It is. And yet, you didn't lead with your net worth." "I don't lead with what isn't earned." That stayed with her. In the weeks that followed, they met again. Slowly. A bookstore coffee stand, a walk through the sculpture garden near Penn Station, a shared car ride after a bridal showcase got rained out. Nothing extravagant, nothing forced, no rushing. Lennox didn't ask about her past, but he noticed things. The way she tensed when her phone rang unexpectedly, the way she didn't correct him when he said something kind about commitment, the way she never once talked about Christmas. She didn't explain, and he never demanded her story. Instead, he made space for her. He never interrupted her silences, never filled them, just let her exist. And that was rare. One evening in early March, they sat on a bench downtown, sipping takeaway drinks from a Thai noodle shop. Celine watched the streetlights flicker on. He turned toward her, his tone easy. "Pain doesn't scare me," he said. "But fake love does." She didn't reply, but her eyes met his. "I don't give it," he added, "and I don't stay near it." She believed him. Spring leaned into Baltimore with the kind of warmth that made people believe in second chances. The city streets unfroze. The tulips in Federal Hill opened like exhaled lungs, and on a small balcony that overlooked the water, Celine Rourke found herself doing something she hadn't done since last Christmas. She laughed. Not politely, not to fill a pause, but the kind of laugh that catches in your throat first, like surprise. The kind you only let out when something cracks you open unexpectedly. Lennox had said something about poorly designed staircases, about how people trip, more in luxury homes than in subway stations, and she couldn't hold it in. She covered her mouth mid-laugh, startled by the sound of herself. He tilted his head slightly. "You okay?" Her smile lingered. "I haven't heard that in a while." "You laughing?" She nodded. "Then we're making progress." She didn't tell him how long it had been. She didn't tell him that since walking out of Suite 407, most of her days had been performed rather than lived. Because this felt unforced, like air after suffocation. They weren't dating. Not officially. But he checked in, brought her coffee on long work days, left her voice notes that always ended with, "No need to reply, just thinking of you." He wasn't trying to impress her. He was just present, and that made him hard to ignore. Their connection didn't come through grand declarations. It came through repetition. A shared tie order. The quiet way he handed her a jacket when the wind picked up. The way he'd wait for her to initiate deeper conversation. He never pressed, never hinted, never asked her to be ready before she was. One evening, while rearranging fabric swatches for a bride who'd changed her entire palette last minute, Celine asked softly, "Do you always take things slow?" Lennox didn't look up from his drink. "I take things seriously. And what does that mean?" "It means I'd rather build trust than chase moments." That sentence stayed with her. She'd once built something fast. With Callan, everything had felt intense, immediate, dazzling. But the kind of dazzling that burns out by New Year's. With Lennox, nothing was forced to shine. It just existed, warm and steady. One Saturday, he brought her to a rooftop event hosted by one of his clients, a cultural center renovation unveiling. Celine hesitated before saying yes. Public events weren't her thing anymore, not since everyone had started asking, "Where's your fiancé?" with the kind of smile that assumed the answer would be romantic. But Lennox assured her, "No press, no expectations, just space. You can leave in 5 minutes if you want." She didn't leave. She stayed for 2 hours. He introduced her to no one as anything other than Celine. No labels, no performance. She liked that. Later that night, as he walked her to her car, he paused at the curb. The air had that soft chill that sneaks in before April. She pulled her jacket tight. Lennox glanced at her fingers, which were loosely wrapped around her keys. "Still scared of being seen?" he asked. Celine hesitated, then answered honestly, "I don't know if I'm scared or just tired of performing forgiveness. I don't feel." He nodded. "Good. Don't rush that." She looked at him. His profile was calm, not waiting for a romantic moment, not chasing a kiss. He meant it. A week later, they shared dinner at her place. Takeout. Simple. No candles. No mood-setting music. Just a small wooden table, 2 plates, and an orchid she kept forgetting to water. Lennox noticed her bare wrist halfway through the meal. "Don't wear watches." "Not anymore." "Why?" She looked down. "Callan gave me one. For our first Christmas." There it was. The first time she'd said his name out loud in months. She waited for Lennox to react. He didn't flinch, didn't pry, didn't ask, "What happened?" He just nodded. "I get that." That was it. After he left that night, she stood at her sink, slowly washing the plates, even though they'd only used one each. And she whispered to herself, "I think I'm allowed to let go." The next morning she did something small, but meaningful. She went to the back of her closet and pulled out the old watch box. Callan's name was still on the inside tag. She didn't cry. She didn't throw it. She simply took the watch out, slipped it into a small donation envelope, and placed it by her front door. By noon, it was gone, and the weight on her wrist didn't come back. Later that week, she texted Lennox for the first time without prompting. "Celine, you mentioned you liked clean design. Want to see my studio?" He replied in 2 minutes. "Lennox, only if you walk me through the story behind every centerpiece." He came by the next evening. She walked him through floral mock-ups, table textures, color palettes and invitation suites. He listened, really listened. By the end of the tour, they stood near her display wall, a long floating shelf with framed photos of her proudest weddings. Lennox pointed to one. A winter wedding on the water, soft blues and velvet runners. That one's yours. She tilted her head. How do you know? Because everything about it feels like someone who knows how to turn quiet into beauty. She didn't respond. But that night, as he left, she hugged him for the first time. Not side hug, not polite. A full, warm, slow hug. The kind where both people close their eyes. He didn't say a word. He just wrapped his arms around her like he already knew what it cost her to let someone in again. And for the first time since last Christmas, she didn't feel hollow after someone left. She felt filled. Comment build with peace. If you believe love should feel safe, not rushed, like this story, if you've ever had to let someone earn your trust again, the right way. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more powerful tales of quiet strength, healing, and second chances. Share this episode with someone who deserves a love that listens more than it speaks. The days moved smoother now. Celine didn't mark them with the same dread she once did. The calendar on her wall was filled again, not with survival, but with life. Studio meetings, brunches, calls from clients who trusted her because of how calmly she handled beauty. Her hands, once slow from grief, now moved with purpose again. But grief had a habit. It never asked to return. It just knocked. That knock came in May, a Monday. The sky was bright, the city stretching into summer with confidence. She was seated on Lennox's balcony, barefoot, reviewing floral mock-ups for an outdoor wedding in Annapolis. Her hair was tied up and her iced tea was halfway gone. She had just texted a bride back when her phone rang. Callan. The name appeared so clean on her screen, it almost looked like a mistake. But it wasn't. It was him. Her thumb hovered over the decline button, but she didn't press it. She answered. Celine, he said her name like it still belonged to him. She didn't speak. I know I shouldn't be calling, but I need to say something. The silence stayed heavy between them. That night, he started, was nothing like what it looked like. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't. You were exactly what you looked like, Callan, she said quietly. There was a pause. Then, she meant nothing. And yet, you risked everything. Another pause. I was scared. We got engaged and everything changed. You became perfect, and I felt like I didn't deserve it. You were right. She hadn't planned to say it. It came out like a breath. Not angry, not vengeful. Just final. Celine, I miss you. Silence. I miss how I used to feel around you. She raised an eyebrow to herself. I miss the way we were. Before all of it, I keep thinking if I had just told you I was struggling, you had a chance to tell me the truth, she cut in. You chose candles and champagne instead. I want to see you. No, please. She closed her eyes, then asked softly, do you remember what you told me our first Christmas together? He didn't answer right away. You said I was the only home you wanted to keep. She let the words hang. Then, but you locked the door on that home, Callan. You made me walk out of it with nothing but my name and your silence. He exhaled. Is there someone else? She didn't flinch. Yes. There was a pause so long, it sounded like he might have hung up. But then he spoke. Do you love him? Yes. This time, her voice didn't shake. She said it with the clarity of someone who didn't owe explanations. I hope you don't call again, she said calmly. Not out of hate, but because I don't belong to your memory. And she hung up. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the phone down. Not because of regret, but because closure doesn't always feel like relief. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion finally being honored. She stayed still for a long moment, then turned the page in her mock-up book, her breath even, her spine straight. When Lennox returned to the balcony 20 minutes later with fresh drinks, she didn't mention the call. She just smiled and asked, would you use wildflowers at a fall wedding? He looked at her, paused for a moment, then answered, if they're chosen for meaning, not trend, yes. And they moved on. Later that night, she sat at her kitchen counter, phone silent now, watching the moonlight stretch over her windows. She opened a notebook she hadn't touched since last winter, the one where she'd sketched ideas for a wedding she never planned. She flipped to the last page. Blank. She picked up her pen and wrote, "I choose what stays." Then she closed it and never opened it again. 2 days passed. Celine didn't tell Lennox about the call, not because she was hiding it, but because it didn't feel necessary. That chapter had closed. Quietly, without a bang, without a dramatic outburst. And in her world, that was how endings stayed finished. She no longer needed to rehearse what she would have said if she'd been braver, because she had been brave. She answered, listened, and told the truth. The real kind. That Sunday, she returned to the church she had visited on Christmas Day. Not to pray, not to look for answers, but because she wanted to sit in the same back pew and remember how far she had come. She carried no napkin in her coat pocket this time, only keys, a lip balm, and peace. The church looked exactly the same blinking tree lights, now boxed in the corner. Same soft hymns playing faintly through the speaker. But this time, the air around her wasn't heavy. She didn't feel watched. She didn't feel like someone trying to breathe through shame. She felt still, rooted. When she stepped outside, the breeze met her like an old friend. Lennox called her later that evening. She answered on the first ring. "I was thinking," he said, voice low like always. "You've seen almost every part of my world now. Have the first, almost. But not the place where I go to disappear. That sounds mysterious. It's just a cabin." She smiled. "Let me guess, on a hill with too much fog and no phone reception?" "Exactly. Thought you'd hate it." "I might. Want to find out?" She said yes. The drive to the cabin was about 2 hours outside the city. They left early Friday morning. The roads were open, the sky that soft, creamy blue that only spring could offer. Celine leaned her head against the passenger seat window, eyes half closed as Lennox drove. He didn't play music. He didn't speak much. He just let the silence keep them company, and she didn't mind. The cabin was simple, wooden. One story. Surrounded by trees thick enough to hush the wind, it had a wraparound porch, 2 chairs, and a tiny mailbox with no name. Inside, everything was clean and quiet. Dark pine floors, linen curtains, and a bookshelf that wrapped around the main wall. She walked slowly through the space, fingertips brushing the edges of the furniture like she was learning it by feel. "You live here?" "Not always," Lennox said, "but it's where I breathe." She turned to face him. "Thank you for bringing me." He nodded. That first night, they made pasta. Simple. Garlic, olive oil, and cherry tomatoes. He brought in a small paper bag. They cooked without much talking, moved around each other with the kind of comfort that only came when 2 people weren't trying to prove anything. After dinner, they sat by the small fireplace. Celine pulled her knees to her chest, a thick throw blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Lennox handed her a mug of mint tea. She sipped, looked into the firelight, then spoke, unprompted. His silence used to haunt me. Lennox didn't respond. He looked at her gently, eyes steady. "I thought the worst thing he did was betray me. But that wasn't it. It was how quiet he went after. Like I never mattered enough to explain anything, to apologize, to even lie." She set the mug down. "But you know what scared me most?" "What?" "That maybe I was easy to forget." She didn't cry, but her voice cracked. Lennox leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "Then let me say something that I mean, and I'll only say it once." She looked at him. "You are unforgettable. No performance, no emphasis, just fact." And something inside her, something buried for months, finally let go. She exhaled, not just breath, grief. And for the first time in months, she felt her chest rise again. Without weight, they didn't kiss. They didn't need to. That night, she slept on the small guest bed, windows cracked just slightly, and for the first time in almost a year, she didn't dream of doors closing. She dreamed of them opening. The next morning, he found her sitting on the porch swing, tea in one hand, journal in the other. "You write?" She nodded. "Not well. Doesn't have to be good." Just has to be honest. I've been honest for a long time, just never on paper. What did you write? She turned the journal to show him a single sentence. The peace came when I stopped needing closure. They stayed another day, walked through the trails behind the cabin, cooked again. This time, he let her pick the recipe. He didn't ask what she needed. He didn't try to fill the silence. He just stood beside her in it. And that, more than anything, taught her what safety could look like. Celine returned to Baltimore with more than just her bag. She came back with a quiet steadiness in her steps, one that no longer waited for the next disappointment. One that no longer looked over her shoulder for a past trying to sneak back in. It had only been a weekend, but something had shifted. She saw her apartment differently now, not as the place she was abandoned in, but the space she chose to reclaim. The throw blanket on the couch no longer reminded her of cold nights alone. It reminded her of the cabin porch, of tea, of morning light. And her phone? It stayed silent, not because she needed it to, but because she didn't dread its sound anymore. The following week, she returned to work. Her calendar was full. 2 spring weddings, 1 venue styling for a photography campaign, and several consultations lined up back to back. It should have felt overwhelming. But for the first time in months, she welcomed the motion. She wasn't working to escape. She was working because she had something to offer. On Wednesday, Lennox sent her a voice message. Booked a new client. Old museum downtown being turned into a private event hall. You'd love it. Want a first look before they gut the place? She smiled at the audio, clicked her calendar, and cleared Friday afternoon. I'm in. Text me the address. The museum sat on the edge of the harbor, its stone facade worn with time but dignified. Celine had passed it dozens of times, never realizing the story it carried inside. When she arrived, Lennox was already waiting by the gate. He handed her a hard hat with her name on a taped label. She raised a brow. Seriously? You're the consultant now. Act like it. She laughed. This is not my aesthetic. Safety before style. Inside, the building smelled like history. Dust, old books, cracked paint. But beneath it all, there was elegance waiting to resurface. She ran her hand along a banister that curved like a question mark. This place has a pulse. Lennox nodded. That's why I took the job. Not everything deserves to be torn down. She looked at him. He didn't flinch. They walked the space in silence. He showed her where the glass dome would go, where the marble floor might be restored, where the wall would open into a garden-facing ballroom. At one point, he stepped back and gestured toward the mezzanine above. Picture this. A string quartet up there, light pouring in through a skylight. Tables below. She let her eyes wander with his words. She could see it, the transformation. And something deeper stirred in her chest, because she realized she could see herself in the space, working, laughing, being still, without Callan, without fear. As they walked through one of the old gallery halls, she stopped. In the center of the room was a massive display case, empty now, but once used for fragile sculpture pieces. I remember this, she said quietly. You've been here before? A field trip. Middle school. I was 12. What do you remember? She traced a finger along the dusty glass. Being ignored. He tilted his head. She smiled faintly. I had made this paper swan. We were told to bring something artistic. Mine wasn't perfect, but I'd worked hard on it. A teacher walked past, looked at the popular girl's glitter drawing, and skipped mine completely. She looked at him. That was the first time I told myself maybe I was too quiet to be seen. Lennox stepped closer. You weren't too quiet. They were too distracted. They stood there for a moment, not touching, not moving. And somehow, that small memory healed more than 100 conversations ever had. Later, back in her apartment, Celine opened a drawer in her closet she hadn't touched in months. Inside were sketches, old vision boards, notes on bridal concepts she'd shelved after the breakup. She took them out, one by one, reviewed each page like an archivist. Some felt dated, some felt broken, but some still had life in them. She kept those, not as reminders of what she lost, but as foundations for what she could still build. That weekend, she attended a friend's engagement dinner. She hadn't RSVP'd until the night before. Crowds made her nervous. Questions made her tired. But she dressed in a soft burgundy dress, kept her jewelry light, and let herself be seen again. Not for who she used to be, but who she was becoming. People greeted her with warmth. One woman whispered, "You look peaceful." And Celine smiled. "Thank you. I am." Lennox didn't text her that night. She didn't expect him to. Their connection wasn't built on constant presence. It was built on real presence. He'd show up when it mattered. And when he didn't, she trusted he still respected her space. That night, she stood at her window and watched the city lights blink back at her. It was May, but the air smelled like December. Except this time, it didn't scare her. It reminded her of what she walked away from and why. The following Friday, Lennox invited her to join him for a walkthrough of the garden extension behind the museum project. It was late afternoon when she arrived. The sky had begun to blush orange, and the air carried the early promise of summer. The garden was still mostly wild, overgrown shrubs, ivy tangled around wrought iron gates, and a patch of stone that would later become the event terrace. He handed her gloves. "Don't get excited," he said with a half grin. "I'm not putting you to work. I just want your eye on something." Celine slipped them on. "I don't mind work." "I know," he said, looking at her with something deeper than admiration. "That's why I trust you." They walked slowly, surveying the layout. Lennox pointed to areas marked by small wooden stakes, explaining plans for lighting, access, and how the structure would blend into the city's historical theme. But midway through the path, he stopped. He turned to face her fully. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said. His voice wasn't tense, but careful. She waited. He took a breath. "What made you stop believing someone could love you completely?" The question landed gently, not like a wound, but like a truth finally asked aloud. She didn't rush to answer. She glanced down to where her fingers traced the edge of her glove, then said softly, "When someone lies to you to protect their comfort, not your heart, it does something to the way you see yourself." Lennox didn't interrupt. She continued, "Callan didn't cheat because I lacked something. He cheated because he was weak. But for a long time, I made it about me, about what I wasn't, about how quiet I was, about how easy it must have been to forget me." Her eyes met his. "And the worst part, he didn't fight for me. Not really. He let me walk out of that hotel like he'd already moved on. That silence, that was the loudest thing he ever said to me." Lennox stepped closer, not to console, but to stand beside her, not in front of her pain. "I ask because I see how careful you are," he said. "With your space, your time, even your joy, you ration it, like you're afraid it'll run out." She nodded slowly. "I am afraid of what? That I'll fall into something that starts tender and ends with me whispering, 'I should have known' again." A breeze rustled through the ivy behind them. He didn't say, "I'd never do that to you." He didn't promise anything he couldn't control. Instead, he said, "I don't want a love you have to brace yourself for." And that made her eyes sting. They sat on a low stone bench beneath a half-dead oak tree, watching the sky grow dimmer. He spoke about his last relationship, how it fizzled not because of betrayal, but because of dishonesty in small things, how it taught him the difference between chemistry and connection. "I want what lasts after the butterflies leave," he said. She smiled faintly. "So, stillness?" "Stillness, yes, but stillness that feels like a resting place, not a dead end." They walked back toward the gate in silence. Before she stepped into her car, she turned to him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For asking me that question. No one ever did before." The next day she received a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single card with neat handwriting. "You don't need to be louder to be remembered. You just need to be real and stay." There was no name, but she recognized the words. That evening, she invited Lennox over for dinner. Not takeout. She cooked. A simple lemon herb chicken with roasted vegetables. As they sat at her small table, the same one where she'd once cried into soup she didn't eat, she looked at him and said, "I've never invited someone into this space before." He glanced around. "Not even Callan?" She shook her head. "This apartment always felt too mine, too sacred. I kept it sealed. He never cared enough to ask why, and I never needed to ask," Lennox said. "I just waited until you opened the door." After dinner, she didn't rush to clear the plates. They sat, talking about nothing and everything. At one point, she noticed his hand resting on the table, fingers curled lightly. Without thinking, she placed her hand over his, not for comfort, not for a gesture, but because her body finally stopped resisting what her heart already knew. He turned his palm up, gently lacing his fingers with hers. No words spoken, none needed. Later, as he prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "You sure you want me to go?" She met his eyes. "I want you to stay." The morning light didn't knock. It slipped gently across her windowsill, creeping between linen curtains and brushing softly against the wooden floors. Celine stirred slowly, not in panic, not in defense, but in the kind of stillness that meant safety. She wasn't alone. Lennox was still asleep on the other side of the bed, one arm draped lazily across the blanket between them. His breathing was steady. No performance, no pressure. Celine blinked up at the ceiling. No regrets. No echoes from Suite 407. No flashbacks. Only warmth. She slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him. In the kitchen, she brewed coffee. Black for him, oat milk for herself. She cracked 2 eggs and pulled out bread to toast. Her movements were unhurried, almost graceful. By the time he walked in, shirt still wrinkled from sleep, she already had 2 plates waiting. He raised a brow. "You made breakfast? I let you stay. Fair trade." They both smiled. They sat at the table, the same table where she once cried over silence, now filled with soft conversation and the aroma of buttered toast. No one rushed to fill the quiet. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was comfort. Halfway through the meal, Lennox set his fork down. "Last night, thank you." She didn't look up immediately. Instead, she focused on cutting her toast. "You made it easy." "No," he said softly. "I just made it honest." After breakfast, they cleaned up together. Not a word spoken about where things were going. No plans to define anything. Just movement in sync. Familiar. He noticed the stack of old design boards still on her counter. "You going to do something with those?" She glanced at them. "I think I'm ready." "For what?" "To start over. Not just personally, professionally." He waited. "I want to design more than weddings. Spaces, intimate ones, rooms that mean something. Places where people feel held, not just seen." Lennox leaned back against the counter. "You'd be brilliant at that." She looked up, surprised by the certainty in his tone. He added, "When you walk into a room, it doesn't matter what's broken. Somehow, you make it feel whole." She didn't reply, but her fingers gripped the edge of the counter just slightly tighter, like her body wanted to believe what her heart was hearing. By noon, he was gone. He kissed her cheek, not her mouth. Left quietly, without the need to say, "I'll text you," because she knew he would, and because she wasn't waiting for validation anymore. That afternoon, she reopened her old studio sketchbook. Page after page of venue concepts, texture samples, color studies, forgotten sparks. She tore out everything that no longer felt like her. What remained? Clean, thoughtful, intentional. She pinned 5 of them to her inspiration board, stepped back and nodded. Not bad for a girl who once believed stillness was weakness. 3 hours later, she received a delivery. No note, just a simple package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a small wooden box. She opened it to find a polished stone, slate gray, smooth to the touch, with a single word etched into its surface: "Stay." Her breath caught. She turned it over. No other message, but she didn't need one. That evening, she sat by her window, stone in hand, and let the silence stretch. It didn't haunt her. It held her. because for the first time in over a year, she wasn't remembering how she left. She was thinking about why she stayed. 3 days after Lennox left her apartment, Celine stepped into a new version of herself. She was scheduled to meet with a high-end event firm that had recently acquired a historic downtown library, hoping to reimagine it into a multi-purpose venue for intimate events, private dinners, and cultural panels. The firm, known for choosing only top-tier designers, had reached out after seeing her minimalist feature in Baltimore Bride last year. She hadn't responded at first, but now she was ready. The meeting took place on the 5th floor of a polished mid-century building, with floor-to-ceiling glass and a panoramic view of the harbor. Celine arrived early, hair pinned back, soft grey slacks, a white blouse, and a leather portfolio in her hand. No assistant, no preamble, just her. She walked into the conference room where 2 firm partners waited, Dana Lorne and Maddox Thayer, both dressed in quiet wealth, both flipping through proposal folders. They looked up as she entered. "Ms. Rourke, we appreciate you coming in," Dana said. "I appreciate the invitation. Before we begin," Maddox added, "we want to be transparent. You're not the only one we're considering, but your reputation for subtlety caught our attention." Celine didn't flinch. "I don't design to compete. I design to connect." That made Dana pause. Maddox smiled faintly. "Well said." They asked her to walk them through her proposal. Celine laid out her vision, page by page. "The space is already storied. My job isn't to erase that. It's to invite intimacy into it. I want the walls to whisper, not shout." She showed fabric swatches, muted textures, nothing loud. Lighting suggestions, not chandeliers, but recessed warmth. And then she said the line Lennox had once told her, "I want people to feel like the room is a resting place, not a performance." Dana leaned back, studying her carefully. "Ms. Rourke, who's helping you source this?" "No one," she answered. "This isn't a team pitch. It's a personal one." They both nodded. After she left, she walked down the long hallway and into the elevator without checking her phone. Because she didn't need to know if they liked her. She already liked who she had shown up as. That evening, Lennox called. She answered on the first ring. "How did it go?" "I said everything I meant. That's all that matters." There was a pause. Then he asked, "Do you remember the first thing I said to you?" She smiled. "You criticized my table for being too simple." "Wrong. I said it was bold." "Same difference." "No," he said, "because simplicity takes courage. Boldness just makes it harder to ignore." They hung up without saying "I miss you." Because some truths don't need reminders. They're felt in how you're spoken to, and how you're left, never doubting. The next morning, Celine received an email. Subject: Library Project Award. Congratulations. She didn't jump, didn't scream, didn't call anyone. She just stared at the screen and whispered, "I'm still here." Because after betrayal, after silence, after being passed over and ignored, she was still here. And now, she was chosen again. But this time, by herself. By the end of the week, she'd begun prep work, sketching, color testing, revisiting floor plans. And somewhere in the middle of it, Lennox stopped by with 2 things. A black notebook wrapped in twine, and a drink tray with her favorite iced tea. "What's this?" she asked, lifting the notebook. "From the bookstore downtown," he said. "You've been drawing on scraps for weeks." She turned the cover. Blank pages, smooth paper. And on the inside flap, a handwritten note. "Design the kind of space you'd want to heal in." She didn't say anything at first. She just leaned forward and hugged him. Not tightly, but deeply. And he let his arms wrap around her like the world could pause there. That night, she stayed up late, working, thinking, sketching. But her drawings weren't just spaces. They were feelings now. A corner for quiet confessions. A hall for slow walks. A chair by the window where someone could sit alone and not feel abandoned. This wasn't a venue. It was a love letter to survival. And this time, every room whispered one thing: stay. The library unveiling was set for mid-June. It wasn't a large press event, intentionally so. Celine had requested something softer, more personal. No flashing bulbs, no staged speeches, just an intimate walkthrough with select guests, collaborators, and 2 local journalists known for their attention to emotional architecture. The night before, she stood alone in the finished space. Lights dimmed, florals placed, chairs aligned just slightly imperfect on purpose, to feel lived in. The scent of eucalyptus and lavender lingered lightly in the air. The music, soft instrumental guitar, played on loop from a discreet speaker behind the gallery curtain. She didn't pace. She didn't fidget. She sat in the farthest corner and let herself take it in. Her name was on the brochure. Her name was on the wall plaque. But more than that, her vision was in every inch of the room. And it didn't feel surreal. It felt right. The morning of the unveiling, Lennox showed up 2 hours early with fresh pastries and an envelope. She gave him a look. "What's this?" He handed it to her with a half grin. No speech. Just something to read after the event. Or when it gets overwhelming. She slid it into her folder without opening it. "I'm serious," he added. "Don't read it now." "Why?" "Because you'll get distracted." She smiled. "I'm already distracted." "Good." By noon, the first guests arrived. Event planners, venue directors, a few stylists from other cities. Some of Celine's past brides. Dana and Maddox from the firm nodded proudly at her as they circled the gallery hall. The reactions were quiet, just like the space was intended to be. People lingered longer in the nooks she designed for silence. One woman walked into the reflection hallway and just stopped. "I don't know why," she whispered to her friend, "but I feel like I can breathe here." Celine overheard the comment, and her throat tightened, the good kind. Then the unexpected happened. At 2:10 p.m., just as she was guiding a small group past the mezzanine stairs, a familiar voice called her name from behind. "Celine." She turned, and there he was, Callan Darrow. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't react with visible tension. He looked nearly the same. Same sharp blazer, same confident posture, but there was something hollow in his eyes. He walked toward her slowly. "I heard you were behind this," he said, voice low. "Didn't believe it until I saw it." "It's public record," she said calmly. "I came to see for myself." Celine glanced toward Lennox, who stood at a distance, watching. He didn't step forward. He didn't need to. She had this. "I read about the concept," Callan continued, "about how you didn't just design for weddings anymore." She waited. He gestured to the room. "It's different, warm. It feels like somewhere people would go to feel better." She nodded once. Then the design worked. He paused, unsure of how to respond to her evenness. "I didn't expect to see you again," she said. "And I'm not sure why you came, but if you're looking for something, I'm not holding it." He swallowed. "I guess I just wanted to know if you still think about it." "About what happened?" She didn't hesitate. "No." Callan looked stunned for a second. She added, "I thought about it for a long time. Then I stopped. That's all." He looked down. "I deserved that." She didn't answer, because she wasn't here to console his regret. This wasn't about closure. It was about ownership. He nodded, stepping back. "Well, this is beautiful. You're brilliant. I always knew that." "No," she said softly. "You knew how to use that word. But you never sat still long enough to understand why it mattered." He didn't argue. He turned to leave. And she let him. No weight in her chest. No ache in her gut. Just air. Lennox approached slowly once Callan exited the room. "You okay?" She exhaled, then smiled faintly. "Perfect." He reached into his jacket pocket and handed her the earlier envelope. "You're ready now." She opened it. Inside, a handwritten note. "You didn't need anyone to say you made it, but I'm proud of you anyway. You stayed." Her breath caught, and for a moment, she pressed the card to her chest like it was the only thing anchoring her in place. Then she looked at him. "Come see your favorite room?" Only if I get to sit in my favorite chair. Done. The library event ended just before 5. As the last of the guests trickled out and the staff began quietly packing up chairs and folding tablecloths, Celine sat on the low velvet bench she'd placed beside the front window, the same one Lennox had once called his favorite chair. He joined her moments later, sliding into the spot beside her without a word, handing her a bottle of cold water. "You sure you're okay?" he asked, not pressing, just present. She nodded. "I thought I'd shake," she said. "But I didn't." He smiled. "Because you were standing on your own feet this time, not waiting for someone to catch you." She turned to look at him. "Is that what it looks like?" "It's what it feels like." They sat in silence for a while, the soft remnants of the day still humming through the building, echoing in footsteps and laughter and polite goodbyes. Then, after a few minutes, Lennox leaned back. "I should tell you something," he said. His tone didn't shift. It stayed calm, but Celine knew from the way his fingers curled on his knee that it wasn't casual. She waited. "I almost proposed to someone once," he said. She blinked, surprised not by the confession, but by the clarity in his voice. "I didn't," he continued, "but I almost did." Celine kept her eyes on him. She didn't speak, didn't offer the easy out. She knew this was something he needed to finish on his own terms. We were together 2 years. She was smart, kind, creative, but we weren't honest. We liked how we looked on paper more than how we felt in real life. He paused, then added, "She said I was always too silent, that I watched her more than I showed up for her, and I think she was right." Celine raised an eyebrow. She said that like it was a flaw. Lennox exhaled. "Maybe it was back then. I was present, but not available. I kept waiting for her to fill the space so I didn't have to. I thought silence meant I was being respectful, but silence without intention can feel like absence." Celine looked down at her lap. That sentence, it landed. "I know what that feels like," she said. He looked at her, his voice lower now. "But with you, I don't feel the need to disappear inside my own quiet." That caught her off guard. She wasn't used to people staying soft while being seen. She took a deep breath and asked, "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I want you to know what I've learned," he said, "before this becomes something that needs more than stillness." They didn't speak for a few moments. Outside, the sky was slipping into the golden blue of early evening. Inside, the library felt warm and earned. Celine leaned her head gently against his shoulder. "I'm not afraid of stillness anymore," she said. He turned toward her slightly. "What are you afraid of?" She paused. He didn't answer right away, then said, "You won't forget." She looked up at him. "Because I won't let you." They stayed until the staff turned out the main lights, then walked out together, slowly, with no need to rush. At the steps, he opened her car door but didn't lean in. Instead, he asked, "Are you ready for something that doesn't require healing first?" She smiled. "I think I already have it." The drive home was quiet, but not empty. Her fingers rested lightly on the envelope he'd given her. Her heart beat steady. She didn't replay Callan's face. She didn't second-guess her choices. She only thought about the way Lennox looked at her when he told the truth, and how nothing about it felt like a performance. Back in her apartment, she placed the etched stone from before, the one that said "stay," on her coffee table. Beside it, she added a new object, a blank brass key. She wasn't sure what it unlocked yet, but it belonged there. Because some things don't need meaning at first. They earn it over time. Comment, "I chose myself," if you've ever walked away from something that didn't honor your truth. Like this story, if you believe love begins where honesty and stillness meet. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more quiet victories, powerful healing, and unforgettable moments. Share this with someone who needs a reminder. Peace is louder than closure. 3 weeks after the library unveiling, Celine received an email that forced her to pause mid-step. Subject line, "Proposal, National Design Partnership, Invitation Only." She opened it standing in her kitchen, barefoot, coffee in one hand. The message was short, but the offer was huge. A nationally recognized lifestyle brand, Valise and Holt, was launching an interiors division. They wanted to bring in a small team of emerging designers, voices with fresh, intimate aesthetics. No flashy portfolios, no commercial bloat, just soul, simplicity, and strong instincts. And her name had come up more than once. They wanted to meet. In New York. Next week. She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she sat down at her table, the one where so much of her heartbreak had transformed into clarity, and stared at the blinking cursor. This was what people called the next level. Bigger projects, national reach, major features. But something inside her hesitated. Later that evening, Lennox came over. He brought green curry, and that soft, familiar energy she was starting to crave more than caffeine. She told him about the email while they ate cross-legged on the floor. He didn't react with excitement. He listened, then asked, "What's the hesitation?" "I don't know if I want to build something that big," she said. "Not if it costs me the reason I started." "What was the reason?" She paused. "I wanted to make spaces people could feel safe in, not perform inside. The more exposure I get, the more people want things that look like healing, not feel like it." He nodded slowly. "Then the question isn't, do you want the opportunity? It's, do you want the life it leads to?" She sat with that question all night, and in the morning, she opened her journal. At the top of a blank page, she wrote, "What does success feel like, not just look like?" She made a list. Quiet mornings, one-on-one client moments, walking through unfinished rooms and imagining the softness. Her name not needing to be everywhere. Still being able to say no. Still having time to feel everything. By the time she finished writing, her decision was clear. She replied to the email, "Thank you for considering me. I'm honored, but I'm building something sacred, not scalable. Wishing you a strong and beautiful launch. Celine Rourke." No fanfare, no regret. She didn't forward the message to friends. She didn't screenshot it for proof. She simply deleted it from her inbox and returned to her studio desk. The light came in through the window the same way it always had. And that felt more like success than any feature spread ever could. 2 days later, Lennox surprised her with a framed print of one of her earliest sketches, the one she'd nearly thrown away after the Callan fallout. "I dug it out of your scraps when you weren't looking," he admitted. She took the frame, stunned. "You kept..." "I keep everything that reminds me of who you are." She touched the glass, tears building, not from sadness but from recognition. This was love, not grand gestures, but being seen, uninterrupted. That night, as they lay side by side in her bed, soft music playing low, she turned to him and asked, "What do you think happens when you finally choose the right thing, but it scares you anyway?" He answered without opening his eyes, "You do it scared. You hold your breath. And you stay." By July, something shifted, not just in Celine's schedule, but in her spirit. She no longer operated like someone recovering. She moved like someone rebuilding, the kind of rebuilding that wasn't about proving anything. It was about returning to herself. Brick by quiet brick, she rebranded her business. Not with fanfare, not with a press release. She simply updated her website with a new name, Stillhouse Studio. Design for what matters, not for the noise. Underneath, she added a single sentence. "We don't fill spaces, we give them meaning." Within the first week, her inbox flooded. Not from corporations, from individuals. A retired social worker wanting to turn her garage into a private therapy nook. A couple requesting a grief-friendly sitting room after losing their son. A community center with a forgotten basement they wanted to use for free storytelling nights. These weren't glossy, magazine-ready projects. They were personal, and Celine said yes to every one. Lennox watched her quietly as she worked, not hovering, not advising, but supporting from the edges in the way he always had. One afternoon, as she pinned sketches to her corkboard, he stood beside her. "You're not designing rooms anymore," he said. "You're designing recovery." She glanced at him, chin slightly tilted. "Too dramatic?" "No," she said, voice soft. "Too accurate." That same evening, they sat on her living room floor, surrounded by floor plans and old concept boards she was clearing out. He held one that had never made it to her website. "Why'd you throw this one away?" he asked. She looked over. It was a design she'd created a year ago, a dreamy, open-walled studio with soft flooring, open shelves, and pale clay tones. She shrugged. "It was too honest. Lennox studied it. Then it was probably your best work." There was a long pause. Then he set the board down and turned to her. "I want to ask you something." She waited. "But I don't want it to feel like pressure or a test." Celine leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "Okay." He reached into his jacket pocket, not for a ring, for a folded sheet of paper. He passed it to her. She unfolded it. It was a list. The Stillhouse Cabin project. Outdoor sitting area with built-in benches. Custom-designed glass wall with privacy tint. Fireplace corner with stacked stone. Reading loft with skylight. 2 mugs, always left on the counter. She stared at it. "This is," he nodded slowly, "a space. For us. If you want it." It wasn't a proposal. It was a blueprint for a shared life. Not an escape. A home. Her eyes stung, but she didn't cry. She simply whispered, "I want that." They didn't hug. Not yet. He leaned in, pressed his forehead gently to hers. "You deserve every room you design for others, and someone to stay in them with." That night, Celine stayed up late again, but not to work. She sat by the window, hand on the glass, city lights blinking far below. She wasn't wondering anymore who would stay. She was deciding who to build with. And, for once, she chose right. The first beam went up in early August. Celine stood on the clearing where the Stillhouse cabin would rise, her boots kicking soft dust, her heart beating quieter than it used to, but deeper. The air smelled like cedar and change. Lennox was beside her, pointing toward where the southern wall would frame the view of the lake. "No screens," he said. "Just glass. You should wake up to something honest." She nodded, watching as contractors moved carefully around the foundation. Everything was measured, clean, quiet. She felt that in herself too. No rush, just readiness. Each step of the build felt like ceremony. Celine didn't oversee it like a client. She walked it like a partner. She didn't bring blueprints anymore, just her eye. Every tile, every plank, every fixture. She chose with care, not control. And when Lennox disagreed, which was rare, he didn't fight to win. They decided together. One morning, while looking at lighting samples, she held up a frosted bulb and asked, "Do you think this feels like us?" He studied it for a moment. "Too cold." She smiled. "Exactly what I thought." The site became their second home. During breaks, they'd sit on upturned paint buckets, sipping coffee, talking about everything except the future. Not because they were scared, but because neither of them needed to fantasize anymore. They were living it. But even peace brings its own kind of fear. One night, back in the city, Celine lay in bed, watching shadows shift across the ceiling. Lennox was asleep beside her, breathing slow and even. She turned away, eyes open. And the question crawled in. What if it doesn't last? Not the love. Not the build. Not the stillness. What if it all vanished again, like it did last time? The next morning, she didn't mention it. Instead, she showed up at the construction site early, alone. The wind was soft. The frame of the house was beginning to resemble something real. She stepped onto what would be the kitchen floor, closed her eyes, tried to picture mornings here. Sunday music, coffee, quiet shoulders brushing. But the vision kept breaking. Callan's voice echoed, not in words, but in sensation. The betrayal, the sharp retreat, the way she had walked into a room expecting love, and met the truth instead. Lennox found her standing still, hands folded, head bowed. "You okay?" he asked softly. She opened her eyes. "I'm scared." He didn't rush to fix it. Of what? That something this good might not stay. He stepped forward. Then build it in a way that, even if it doesn't, you'll know it was true. Her eyes welled, not because she was falling apart, but because she was no longer pretending to be fearless. And that honesty felt like its own kind of foundation. Later that day, she returned with her sketchbook. She began redesigning the fireplace wall, not for aesthetic reasons, but because she wanted a new place for vulnerability to live. She added a built-in shelf for unread letters, a panel behind the mirror for journals, and a small tile above the mantel etched with a single word, "Stay." She wasn't trying to guarantee permanence. She was honoring the choice. It happened on a Wednesday. Celine was walking the Stillhouse cabin alone while the crew was on a break. The sun filtered through the unfinished skylight above the future reading loft, casting soft streaks of light on the subfloor. She trailed her fingers along the edge of a newly installed window frame, pausing by. The southern wall, the same one she'd once stood in front of, afraid of the future. But this time, it wasn't fear that filled her. It was memory, not the sharp pain of betrayal, the raw, unfinished emotion that came before it. She sat down on a plank where the fireplace bench would eventually go, closed her eyes, and, for the first time in a long time, let herself revisit that Christmas Eve. Not the night itself, not Suite 407, not the shirt on another woman's back. She went further back, to the version of her that had still been hoping. The version that had said okay into the phone without fighting. The version who had felt something break before it was confirmed. Celine sat in silence and let that girl speak. "I wanted to believe him," she whispered aloud. "Even when I already knew." Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't mourning anymore. She was acknowledging. Footsteps crunched outside. Lennox appeared in the doorway, watching her without interrupting. She looked up. "You ever feel like your old pain still lives in your body, even after you've moved on?" He stepped in slowly. "Pain doesn't disappear. It just gets refiled." Refiled? In the part of you that doesn't rule anymore, just remembers. He sat beside her on the temporary beam. "Every room we're building," he said, "has a past underneath the floorboards. It doesn't stop us from living in it." Celine rested her head lightly on his shoulder. "I needed to come back here today, just to be sure I wasn't still carrying it." He glanced at her. "And I'm not," she said quietly. "But I needed to look it in the eye one last time, not flinch, just see it." He reached into his back pocket and handed her a photo. It was a black and white snapshot of the cabin's foundation, taken weeks ago. Behind it, in his handwriting, "We build where the ground is honest." Celine held the photo in her palm. She didn't cry. She just breathed, deeply, fully. That weekend, they marked a milestone, first furniture delivery. It was only 2 chairs and a table, but they placed them on the porch like it was sacred, because it was. Later that night, they returned to the city and lay curled on her couch. No words, just music. Her head on his chest, his hand in her hair. She whispered, "I don't want to fear good things anymore. You don't have to, but I might. Then, I'll stay through it." She closed her eyes, because now she knew staying wasn't a promise. It was a choice made again and again. And this time, she wasn't the only one making it. The cabin was almost finished. By mid-September, the windows were in. The floors were polished. The last of the fixtures had arrived, and sunlight now filtered perfectly through the reading loft skylight, just as Celine had imagined it. She walked barefoot through the space one morning before sunrise, coffee in hand. No music, no lights, just the natural sound of wind brushing against the exterior siding and the soft creak of wood beneath her steps. This was what she wanted, not perfection, presence. She opened her phone to check contractor messages, but instead, a new email sat at the top of her inbox. Subject line, "If you'll read this, I'll be grateful." No name, no subject header. She opened it. "Celine, I saw your library project in a digital feature last week. I didn't recognize it at first, but I recognized your name. And then I realized, I remember the woman who used to sit quietly, in the back row of every meeting, always listening, rarely speaking. owe you something. Back then, I watched what happened. I knew Callan was stepping out. I knew it long before you did. He'd flirted around the office, taken calls he never explained, and we, his team, we looked away. We didn't warn you, not because we didn't care, but because it felt easier to pretend it wasn't happening. I've thought about that silence for a long time. Seeing your name attached to something so beautiful reminded me what it looks like when people grow in the dark and still bloom. I just wanted to say, I see you now. And I'm sorry we didn't then. Tessa M. Celine stared at the screen for a long time, not because the message hurt, but because it didn't. She remembered Tessa, one of Callan's firm assistants, always smiling, always busy, always carefully neutral. Back then, she would have clung to this email like a lifeline. Proof, validation, something to hold against Callan's silence. Now, she placed the phone face down and walked outside, not to escape it, to breathe through it. Later that day, she responded, Tessa, thank you. That's kind and brave. You don't owe me anything. We all look away from things that hurt sometimes, but I see you too. And I hope your silence doesn't follow you the way mine used to follow me. Celine. She didn't reread it, didn't wait for a reply. She simply got dressed, tied her hair back, and returned to the cabin. That afternoon, Lennox arrived with the final table piece for the reading loft, a curved walnut side table she'd designed herself. He set it down near the chaise lounge and asked, "What was in your eyes this morning?" She looked up from smoothing the cushion cover. An apology I didn't need, but was grateful to hear. He nodded. Closure? She shook her head. Recognition. They stepped outside as the sky shifted to its early amber. The porch faced the edge of the woods now, with enough distance to feel private, but enough openness to feel free. They sat down side by side on the finished bench, hands resting between them, fingers just barely touching. Lennox glanced at her. What did you say to her? Celine's answer was quiet. That I hope her silence doesn't follow her. He nodded, lips pressed. They watched the sky turn orange. No words, just knowing. The final day of the build came without ceremony. No ribbon cutting, no social post, no announcement. Celine arrived early that morning, a fresh loaf of bread in one arm, a jar of honey in the other. Lennox was already inside, barefoot, sweeping sawdust from the corner near the loft stairs. Didn't think you'd beat me here, he said. You underestimate how excited I am about warm floors. He smiled. No kiss, no long embrace. They didn't need any of that. They were home now, even before the door had a nameplate. The Stillhouse cabin was finished. It didn't look luxurious. It looked lived in, even before a single box had been moved. The fireplace flickered quietly. The couch faced the trees. The kitchen was simple, white, wood and brass. There was no grand bedroom, just an open sleeping loft above the kitchen, reachable. By wooden steps she had insisted feel more like a ladder than stairs. It was everything she didn't know she needed, until she stood inside it. After lunch, bread, honey and fruit on mismatched plates. They moved their things in. Together, no helpers, no movers. Just two people choosing what deserved to enter this new space. She left the box of old journals in the back seat of her car. He carried in a stack of books and a single photo. His parents, arm in arm, both smiling like the world had finally made sense to them. Celine hung it quietly above the reading nook. By late afternoon, it was done. She stood in the center of the main room and turned in a slow circle. She hadn't cried since Suite 407. Not when Callan called. Not when the studio launched. Not when the library was unveiled. Not even when she finally let Lennox in. But standing here, in the middle of something they'd built from the broken pieces of who they both used to be, she did. Silent tears. Not from pain, from peace. Lennox stepped behind her, arms around her waist, chin against her shoulder. Want me to say something wise? She shook her head. Want me to say nothing? She nodded. He stayed silent. And that meant more than anything. They spent that first evening sitting on the porch, watching the wind move through the trees. She wore one of his sweaters. He didn't ask for it back. They shared one mug of tea, passing it without speaking. It wasn't romantic. It was sacred. As the sun slipped away, he turned to her and asked, "Are you happy?" She didn't rush to answer. She looked around, at the cabin, the trees, the way her body felt resting here, not braced. Then she said, "I'm not afraid." He nodded slowly. "Then yes," she added, "I'm happy." They walked back inside without touching, but their silence hummed with something full. He pulled the shade down on the window. She lit one candle. And when they met again in the middle of the room, she whispered, "We're not celebrating surviving." He waited. "We're celebrating arriving." He kissed her then, not in hunger, not in performance, in recognition. This was the life they built. Not perfect, not loud, but true. Christmas returned quietly. There were no flashing lights, no extravagant plans, no pressure to perform joy. The cabin wore winter like it had been waiting for it. Pine needles at the porch edge, a thin lace of snow softening the rooftops. Inside, the fireplace burned low, and Celine moved slowly through the space she had once only dreamed of. This time last year, she had been walking into Suite 407. Now, she was walking through a home built on stillness, not illusion. There were no wrapped gifts, just one letter, unsealed, on the table. It was addressed simply for the woman who stayed. She had written it a week before, after waking early to journal. And today, Christmas morning, she would read it. Not because she needed to revisit pain, but because she needed to mark how far she'd come. She poured a small mug of tea, pulled her blanket around her shoulders, and sat in the reading nook facing the snow. Then she opened the letter. "You were never dramatic. You were just quiet in a loud world. And when it betrayed you, it wasn't because you were blind. It was because you chose hope. That day you walked into the hotel you already knew. Your chest had known for weeks. But you still walked in anyway. Not to catch him. To catch yourself. And you did. You walked out without yelling. You packed your things without begging. You didn't need to be believed. You needed to be done. You built your life again, without apology. You let someone stay, not because you needed saving, but because he didn't need to see you broken to love you. You spoke softly, trusted slowly, designed carefully. And now, look where you are. Christmas morning, safe, not in someone else's arms, but in your own story. Keep building, keep choosing, keep staying. You're home now." Celine folded the letter. Her hands didn't shake. Her heart didn't ache. She stood up, walked to the fireplace, and placed it behind the tile, the one etched with the words "Stay." She didn't need to keep rereading it. She'd already lived it. Outside, snow fell with grace. Not in a rush, not in chaos, just enough to soften the world. Lennox stepped in from the porch, his jacket dusted in white. He didn't say Merry Christmas. He didn't hand her a gift. He just smiled, walked over, and pulled her close. She leaned into his chest and whispered, "This time last year, I walked in on the truth." He kissed her forehead and said, "And this year, you walked into yourself." The cabin welcomed its first guests 3 days after Christmas. 2 of Celine's clients, an older couple, retired teachers, had asked for a space to reflect, to heal, to be quiet. They'd lost a son 2 years ago, never remarried, never hosted holidays since. They didn't need design. They needed stillness. Celine didn't hesitate. "Come for a weekend," she said. "It's yours. We won't be there." They arrived with soft luggage and tired eyes. Celine and Lennox greeted them, gave a quiet tour, handed them the only key. "Don't tidy it up before you leave," she said. "Let the room hold your presence." They didn't cry, but they looked at her the way only people who understand loss do. And then they stepped inside. Celine and Lennox drove back to the city that evening. Silence filled the car. Not heavy, not stiff, just understood. At one point, she reached over and turned down the heater fan. "I used to think healing had to feel big," she said. "Loud, like a breakthrough. Lennox glanced at her. And now? She looked out the window. Now I know it's quieter. It looks like holding the door open for someone else. That night, back at her apartment, she sat on the floor and opened her old sketch folder, the one she had hidden in the closet behind her coats. She flipped past the wedding visions, past the brand mock-ups, past the floor plans. At the back was a page she hadn't remembered drawing. A small room. Just one chair. One lamp. No walls. At the bottom, she had scribbled, "Where no one performs, only rests." She stared at it for a long time, then carefully tore it out and placed it on her coffee table. The next morning, the couple texted her a photo, 2 mugs on the porch railing, a caption below, "We didn't talk much, but we felt everything." Celine pressed her palm to her heart. Not because it hurt, because it didn't. New Year's Eve arrived gently. No parties, just the 2 of them. Back at the cabin, fire low, 1 plate of grapes, 1 bottle of sparkling cider. Celine stood at the porch edge, wrapped in a blanket, watching snow drift down the trees. Lennox joined her, slipping his arms around her waist. He whispered, "Do you remember the first thing I said to you?" She smiled. "Yes." "Bold to keep everything so simple." "And do you remember what you said?" "Bold to wear a suit and not introduce yourself." They both laughed quietly. Then he added, "You changed my life." She turned to him. "You reminded me it was mine." As midnight approached, she didn't count down. She simply breathed. And when the clock turned, she didn't cheer. She whispered 1 word, not out loud, but in her heart. Stay, not in fear, not in performance, not in silence, but in peace. You don't have to scream to be heard. Sometimes the strongest thing you'll ever do is walk away, silently, with your dignity, with your truth, with your heart still beating, even if it's bruised. Celine didn't shout. She didn't throw things. She didn't demand an explanation. She walked in, saw the betrayal, and chose peace over performance. That's real power. Some people think silence means weakness, but in reality, it's restraint. It's knowing you don't need chaos to confirm what your heart already knows. Lennox didn't fix her. He didn't rescue her. He simply met her where she was, gently, consistently, truthfully. And that's what love is. Not the performance, not the grand gestures, but the quiet presence, the person who sees your bruised edges and still stands close. If you're healing from something or someone, take this as your reminder. You don't need closure from the one who hurt you. You don't need a louder ending. You just need one soft beginning with yourself. Comment no more performances if you're done pretending and ready for peace. Like this video if you've ever had to rebuild your life in silence. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more powerful tales of quiet strength, true healing, and love that whispers, not shouts. Share this with someone who needs to know they are enough, even when no one claps. And remember, real love doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives when you finally stop chasing what ran away.